First at 9 this Sunday, the 6th of April 2025. Bidding farewell, Indian Prime Minister wraps up official visit to Sri Lanka. On the third day, PM Modi inaugurates key India-backed projects in Anuradhapura. Talking tariffs, Sri Lanka to present new proposals aimed at reducing trade deficit with the United States. Efforts underway in a bid to avoid 44% reciprocal tariffs set to take effect on the 9th of April. All in for hands-off. Mass protests erupt across US cities as citizens denounce President Trump. Demonstrators also criticize Elon Musk's growing involvement in government affairs. Welcome visitors. Sri Lanka welcomes over 200,000 tourists in March alone, bringing the total number of visitors for the first quarter to more than 700,000.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lanka Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwasi Dino Sensorain, then Langamati Pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta Parisan Karagatot? Api Parisan.
ඉතින් මොකටද නිකන් නාගන්නේ? ස්වදේශී කොහොඹ lemongrass අද කාලෙට ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ම විසඳුම.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Brought to you by the only Sri Lankan media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms. Recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. Now in your top story tonight, on the final day of his official state visit to Sri Lanka, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the Anuradhapura religious city complex today and invoked blessings at the Jayasiri Ma Bodhi. Then the Indian Premier, along with President Anukumara Dissanayake, co-inaugurated two projects funded by the Indian government at the Anuradhapura railway station. Following the inaugurations, the Indian Premier left for India, concluding his three-day state visit in Sri Lanka. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi touched down on the 4th of April at around 8:30 p.m., commencing his three-day official state visit to Sri Lanka. Following an official welcoming ceremony for the Indian Premier at the Independence Square yesterday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met President Anukumara Dissanayake to hold bilateral discussions at the Presidential Secretariat. Subsequently, 7 memoranda of understanding were exchanged between the governments of India and Sri Lanka on sectors including defence, energy and digitalisation. Afterwards, both leaders virtually inaugurated 3 development projects: the commencement of the Sampur Power Project, the Damulla Agricultural Cold Storage Facility, and the installation of solar panels on 5,000 religious sites spanning all 25 districts. Later, President Anukumara Dissanayake hosted a special banquet at the President's house in honour of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
අග්‍රාමාත්‍ය නරේන්ද්‍ර මෝදි මැතිතුමනි ඔබ ශ්‍රී ලංකා භූමියට ආගන්තුකෙකු නොවි.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, you are not a stranger to Sri Lanka. Your 4 previous visits to Sri Lanka stand testament to the magnitude of your heartfelt connection with our country. We are delighted by the rise of India not just as a superpower, but as a mighty player in the theatre of global geopolitics. We are known for our hospitality. We warmly welcome all our visitors. But I must say that our neighbours across the Pork Strait will always be embraced from the bottom of our hearts. Let's all wish for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's good health, the undeterred progress and development of all Indians, and the friendship between our two nations to continue to blossom and strengthen further. Let's all stand united and pray for these wishes to come true. Thank you.
මේ උදාර අපේක්ෂාවන් වෙනුවෙන් අපි ඒක ආරමුණකින් උණුසුම් හදවතින් ආශිර්වාද කරමු.
नातिपति जी ओबगे आगंतुकः सत्कार्यतः बहोम स्तुति. श्रीलंका आकर मुझे हमेशा
I always feel happy every time I visit Sri Lanka. I am very elated by the warm welcome and love of all Sri Lankans. Geographically, we are very close neighbours. India always stood as a trustworthy friend at every step of Sri Lanka's journey towards development. I believe that our relationship will further strengthen in the future compared to the past. With that belief, I would like to extend my wishes to see a deepening of friendship between our countries and for the continued progress and prosperity of all Sri Lankans.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
On the last day of Indian Prime Minister's official state visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Anuradhapura on an Indian Air Force helicopter. Under tight security, the Indian Prime Minister arrived at the Anuradhapura religious city complex, escorted by a special convoy. During the visit, Prime Minister Modi and President Dissanayaka paid homage to the sacred Jaisirima Bodhi tree. The Indian Premier sought blessings from the chief incumbent of the 8 great Buddhist shrines, Dr. Pallegama Hemarathanathera. During their meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi claimed that sacred relics of Gautama Buddha were found during excavations in the 1960s in his home state, Gujarat. The Indian Premier further claimed that discussions will be held with the Sri Lankan President on the possibility of exhibiting these sacred relics in Sri Lanka. Dr. Pallegama Hemarathanathera requested the Indian Premier to develop Bodh Gaya as a spiritual city. The Prime Minister promptly responded to the request made and claimed that steps will be taken in that regard after discussions with President Anura Dissanayaka. The Indian Prime Minister also inaugurated the new Makara Torana within the sacred Jaisirima Bodhi premises. Subsequently, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Anura Dissanayaka officially co-inaugurated the upgraded Maho Omante railway line and the newly installed Maho Anuradhapura railway signalling system at the Anuradhapura railway station. The President and the Indian Premier unveiled the commemorative plaque launching the railway line while also handing out the first signal officially commencing train operations along the newly inaugurated track. The Maho Omante railway line project was funded by the Indian Credit Facility. The total investment for the project stood at $91.27 million. The Maho Anuradhapura railway signalling system, which was established off the back of President Anura Dissanayaka's state visit to India, is a $14.89 million investment funded by the Indian government. Following the key inaugurations, Prime Minister Narendra Modi concluded his 4th state visit to Sri Lanka today. The Indian Premier took off from the Air Force base in Anuradhapura this morning to Rameswaram in Tamil Nadu. In Rameswaram, the Indian Premier inaugurated the Pambam Bridge. The Pambam Bridge, which stretches 48 kilometers along Rameswaram Island off the southeast coast of India, connects India to Sri Lanka through Manna Island.
Union Assurance. චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙත් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Now, in a significant gesture, Sri Lanka today released 14 Indian fishermen to coincide with the visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the island. The release followed detailed discussions between the Indian Premier Narendra Modi and President Anura Dissanayaka yesterday, during which long-standing issue of fishermen's arrests had come up. During his remarks at the joint press briefing, Prime Minister Modi stated that both parties discussed about the fishermen's issues and agreed to move forward regarding this matter with a humane approach. The Indian Premier stressed on the immediate release of fishermen and their boats. As Sri Lanka's Navy continues to arrest Indian fishermen primarily from Tamil Nadu, 119 Indian fishermen and 16 fishing boats were reportedly apprehended by the authorities since the beginning of this year. Now, although Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi left Sri Lanka, his visit continued to dominate political discourse in the island today. Let's take a look at those thoughts now.
Former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited Sri Lanka in 1987. The ruling party carried out a massive protest against the Indo-Lanka Accord, shouting slogans against the Indian peacekeeping force, burning down buses and causing the deaths of 66,000 comrades and 6,600 of their opponents. Will those people come back to life? Can President Anura Dissanayaka and JVP General Secretary Tilvin Silva celebrate their heroes, including the late Rohana Vijayveera, on the 13th of November? Our enemies might think that all those lives lost were in vain. Our foes make this comment. The lesson we learned is that we are not bound by a predetermined model of decision making. We will observe local developments and choose the most suitable relevant action that benefits our aim. We should sign agreements with Prime Minister Modi. We made so many attempts to sign those deals in the past. If we had signed these deals back then, we would not be where we are today. The government must apologize for disrupting these agreements. These agreements should be signed. We never expect them to sing our praises. India is our neighboring state and we cannot go forward as a country without acknowledging India's evolving economic and political landscape. We will intend to reach agreements with every country. We do not have anything to hide. They are now doing what they never publicly said. The Janata Vimukti Peramuna is the only political party that propagates the negative effects of India's regional expansionism. An entire lecture was based on this topic within the JVP's 5 classes program. Before he assumed the presidency, Anurakumara Dissanayaka filed legal action against the construction of the Sampur solar power plant. When India gave that project up, he happily jogged onto Trincomalee. The leaders of the JVP cheered that they were victorious. Prime Minister Modi made them eat their own words. Prime Minister Modi sarcastically forced President Dissanayaka to lay the foundation stone virtually since he prevented the physical foundation stone being laid earlier. They prevented the actual foundation stone being laid. Now they had to lay a digital foundation stone.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
ඩයිබටිසෝල් සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
කැලනි වයර් කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. කැලනි ෆයර් ෂීල්ඩ් වයර්.
Commemorating the 54th April Heroes Day, JVP's General Secretary Tilvin Silva claims that the JVP will turn the country around before they cede power and expressed confidence in emerging victorious at the impending local government polls. Meanwhile, at a separate April Heroes Day commemoration, General Secretary of the Frontline Socialist Party Kumar Gunratnam claims that the once revolutionary JVP, which sits at the seat of power today, has made Sri Lanka a victim of regional politics, interests of crony capitalists and the American empire.
The 54th April Heroes Day commemoration organised by the JVP was held in Anuradhapura yesterday. The commemoration was held under the patronage of the Janata Vimukti Perammuna's General Secretary Tilvin Silva. The JVP was formed on the 14th of May 1965. This year, on the 14th of May, the JVP will turn 60. We are confident that the power vested in us will be reaffirmed at the local government elections to be held in May. We assure you that we will pick this country up and transform it into one of the most developed nations in the world. We will not rest until we usher in this new world. Let's all join hands together and strive towards victory. Meanwhile, the Frontline Socialist Party held a separate event to commemorate the April Heroes. We commemorate April Heroes today at a critical juncture in Sri Lanka's history. While we commemorate and reminisce the rebellion of 1971, the party that led the rebellion back then is at the helm of power now, leading the NPP, Sri Lanka's governing party. When they took over, many expected a lot of positive results, welfare and citizen-centric programs. However, while the JVP wields government power today, Sri Lanka's politics and economy have become victims of regional geopolitics, crony capitalists and the American empire.
As Sri Lanka's apparel industry braces for impact with the 44% US reciprocal tariffs looming ahead, Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa reveals that he requested Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to grant broader Indian market access for Sri Lankan exports. Addressing a public meeting yesterday, Premadasa highlighted that the incumbent government still lacks a comprehensive plan to address the impending economic doom.
A public meeting of the Samagi Janabalawegaya aimed at the impending local government elections was held yesterday at the Colombo East polling division under the patronage of opposition leader and leader of the SJB, Sajith Premadasa. We met with several representatives of the Joint Apparel Association Forum of Sri Lanka. The entire industry is panicking over the US tariffs imposed on Sri Lanka, which are expected to come into effect on the 9th of this month. Currently, 40% of Sri Lanka's apparel exports end up in the US. The industry directly employs 350,000 people, while over 1 million individuals indirectly benefit through the industry. The incumbent government was neither concerned about the apparel industry, nor were they concerned about the other export-oriented businesses. Consequently, a majority of those jobs are now in jeopardy. However, the government has no agenda. We had the opportunity to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. At the meeting, we requested the Indian Premier to grant broader Indian market access to Sri Lankan exports. Currently, Sri Lanka exports only 8 million units of garments at zero duty to India annually. Livelihoods of thousands of workers and the nation's export-oriented businesses could be severely affected if the 44% reciprocal tariffs imposed by the US come into effect. We drew Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's attention to this situation and requested him to remove the 8 million unit zero-duty Indian import control and to increase that limit further, paving the way for Sri Lanka to increase its garment exports to India. I value our citizens and this country.
As the US's reciprocal tariffs continue to stoke fear and panic in Sri Lanka's export sector, Deputy Minister of Economic Development Professor Anil Jayantha expressed optimism that the government would be able to negotiate a reduction in tariffs. During a press briefing today, he also indicated Sri Lanka's willingness to expand imports from the United States as a step towards reducing the trade deficit between the two nations. Meanwhile, Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning Harshana Surya Peruma says that high-level discussions have been held between the Sri Lankan government and US officials in Washington, and further details along with the specifics of those discussions will be deliberated with the Trump administration during a meeting to be held next Tuesday.
If this 44% tariff is imposed on Sri Lanka from the 9th of April, approximately 80% of our exports will be affected. Such a tariff would effectively reduce the competitiveness of our products. The US has asked us to propose ways to reduce our trade deficit with them. We are currently exploring the best strategies to address this issue, including the possibility of revising the existing tariff structure. We have appointed a committee and are conducting discussions on a daily basis. Proposals are being submitted and we will inform you of the developments in due course. Before the 2nd of April, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed the existence of a group called the Dirty 15, countries with substantial trade deficits that are expected to face higher tariffs. Sri Lanka, however, is not among the Dirty 15.
Prior to this matter was announced to the global audience, a discussion based on a very senior delegation overlooking the region from the US who was visiting. We met in the ministry, we had quite good discussions in terms of the impending situation and to understand what type of an approach Sri Lanka could take, given the fact that even though we have a trade deficit from the perspective of US, the value of that trade deficit is not that significant compared to some of the other countries. And an approach was identified as to let's wait and see on the actual numbers that are coming. Then subsequent to the announcement was made, swiftly industry engagements were arranged, and as a result a third step was an appointment of committee to discuss further, to have a strategy to deal with the way forward. A decision was made that Sri Lanka will reach out to a very high level, office level representation from the US administration to discuss the current situation. Virtual discussion was held for nearly an hour. Matters were explained at length, given specifically highlighting the fact that we are within the current IMF program, so revenue consolidation measures are taking place. What are the approaches that we need to take? They clarified based on the information that they have access to at that point in time. We will not have 44% plus 10%. It is 44%. They clarified to us. They mentioned it is an evolving situation. The final decisions we have to wait and see on the 9th, depending on the way how it unfolds. We have to look at the approaches that other countries are taking also. So a next meeting is to be scheduled very soon with more details discussing towards specific outcomes, etc. We have suggested a date next Tuesday. We are awaiting confirmation from their side.
Sri Lanka දැනට වෙන රටවලට පනවන තීරු බදු අඩු කරන්න අවධානයක් යොමු කළා තියෙනවා.
When reviewing all our imports, generally a 20% tariff is applied across the board. Even if we reduce it to zero, it would not significantly increase US imports to Sri Lanka. However, since we are currently under an IMF program, any reduction in tax revenue must be first discussed with the IMF. We believe it will not be an issue. Furthermore, beyond tariff reductions, we are open to increasing our imports from the US or pursuing public investments as suggested during bilateral discussions to reduce the trade deficit.
දැන් හදිසියේවත් අපිට අවාසනාවකට negotiations වලට යන්න බැරි වුණොත්
මොකක් හරි බෑකප් ප්ලෑන් එකක් තියෙනවද අපිට?
උදේසොද සාකච්ඡා මට්ටමේදී අපේ
We are confident that we can reach a decision through these discussions. The US has no geopolitical tensions with Sri Lanka, so we are approaching this positively. If negotiations fail and we cannot compete with the US, we will explore alternative options such as seeking new foreign markets and trade partnerships.
ඒ වගේම තවත් පාර්ශවකරුවන් කණ්ඩායම් සමග සාකච්ඡා කිරීම එවැනි දේවල් වලට යන්න පුළුවන්.
විපක්ෂ නායකවරයා සඳහන් කරා ඉන්දියාව අපෙන් ගන්න ඇඟලුම් මිලියන් 8කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් ඒ හමුණු සාකච්ඡාවේදී ඉල්ලීමක් කරා කියලා ඊට වඩා වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් ගන්න කියලා. එහෙම සාකච්ඡාවක් වුණාද සහ අග්‍රාමාත්‍යවරයාගේ සංචාරය අතරතුරදී මේ ගැටලුවට විසඳුමක් රජයේ පාර්ශවයෙන් ඉන්දියාවෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මේ කාරණයක් අපි සාකච්ඡාවට බඳුන් කළා, ඉල්ලීමක් කළා. ඒ වගේම අපිට යහපත් ප්‍රතිචාරයක් ලැබුණා. ඒ පිළිබඳව සලකා බලනවා කියලා.
With that, here's a look at more local news across the island in brief.
The National People's Power's Kegaul District MP Kosalanuwan Jayavira passed away today over a sudden heart attack. The deceased MP was 38 years of age at the time of his passing. Meanwhile, a 28-year-old Indian woman from Mizoram, India, was arrested at the Bandaranaike International Airport while attempting to smuggle into Sri Lanka a haul of cocaine valued at 65 million rupees. Investigations revealed that she had previously visited Sri Lanka 3 times. The suspect was nabbed after authorities came across crucial pieces of intelligence in this regard. According to sources, the stock of cocaine weighing 1 kilo and 644 grams was wrapped in plastic and concealed within the fake bottom of a suitcase. Meanwhile, a 50-year-old local businessman preparing to accept the consignment of cocaine was also arrested by the Police Narcotics Bureau at around 1:30 p.m. today. The 2 suspects will be produced before the Nigama Magistrates Court and detained for further investigation and questioning. In other local news, a warm weather advisory was issued for residents of the northern, north central and eastern provinces and the Monoragala district. The heat index, the temperature felt on the human body, is likely to increase up to caution level in several areas tomorrow. The department noted that prolonged exposure to the sun and outdoor activity will result in fatigue, while continuing activity could lead to heat cramps. Therefore, residents are advised to stay hydrated and limit strenuous outdoor activities.
Welcome back. You're joining Other Derana, Sri Lanka's most trusted news source. Now in your business news, scaling a monumental target of achieving 3 million tourist arrivals this year, Sri Lanka has so far attracted 722,276 tourists during the first 3 months of 2025. The latest statistics from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority depict that 229,298 tourist arrivals were recorded between the 1st and the 31st of March. The highest number of tourist arrivals for the month of March were recorded between the 1st and 7th, with 53,113 tourists visiting the island. India continues rather to remain in the top spot amongst those markets, with 39,212 tourists visiting, while Russia trails behind with a record of 29,177 tourists visiting the island during the month of March. A significant number of tourist arrivals were also reported from the United Kingdom, Germany, France and China. The Committee on Public Accounts disclosed a significant misuse which occurred in the issuing of permits for the import of fully electric vehicles to Sri Lankans employed abroad based on foreign remittances. Speaking during the COPA meeting recently, Auditor General WPC Vikramaratne highlighted that officials of the then administration had engaged in a business under the guise of issuing vehicle permits.
According to the cabinet paper issued, vehicle permits can only be issued by the Controller General of Imports and Exports. However, the relevant permits have been issued by the Secretary to the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. This implies that they have not followed the procedure recommended by the cabinet. From drafting the cabinet paper to its presentation, it seems that the former minister and the secretary were following a different strategy. This also suggests that the Secretary to the Ministry of Industries had been acting on the directives of former MP Manushanana. The former MP had granted certain opportunities for a group of selected individuals. During the time period in which vehicle imports had been banned, were there any vehicles which had been released from the customs? Yes. Vehicles belonging to certain embassies had been imported and some special vehicles were provided to the Sri Lanka police. However, these imports were made with government approval. No vehicles were imported for other purposes.
මේ 2021 දින.
On the 20th of June 2021, two BMW vehicles had been released by the customs. The ownership of those vehicles were transferred to a person named Yoshita Rajapaksha, a resident of Madamulana. The names listed as vehicle bearers are Chanuka Ratwatte and Asanti Bandarnayaka. These might be the vehicles which were seized over violation of customs regulations when importing those vehicles into Sri Lanka. However, those vehicles might have been released following investigations. We will provide a proper report on the relevant matter since the records of the pertinent case should be available on our data systems.
මේ වාහන ගෙන්වීමේ අවසරය ලැබෙන කණ්ඩායම සම්බන්ධයෙන් පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් තිබුණද මෙන්න මේ කණ්ඩායමටයි මේ අවසරය හිමි වෙන්නේ කියලා.
ඒ අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩල සටහනේ තියෙන්නේ එතන රැකියාවට ශ්‍රී
It is evident that former MP Manushana Nayakkara had amended laws in favour of him in order to import vehicles. He should be at least residing abroad to be employed there. To that end, how can vehicle permits be issued for 4 individuals who had not travelled abroad during the relevant period?
මම දන්නේ මම මොකද මම මේ යම් ප්‍රශ්න මේ සහගත තත්ත්වයන් ඇති වුණාම මට එතනින් යන්න වුණා.
මොකක්ද එතන වෙච්ච කාරණා?
මං අතින් සමහර ඉල්ලීම් ප්‍රතික්ෂේප වුණා කියන්නේ.
නීත්‍යානුකූලව කරන්න කියන එක ප්‍රතික්ෂේප වුණා ඔබතුමීට යන්න වෙනවා කියන එකද මේ කියන්නේ?
මට රජයේ නිලධාරියෙක් විදිහට ඍජුව වැඩ කරන්න බැරි අපහසු තත්ත්වයක්.
මේකේ අවසාන නිගමනය තමයි බලපත්‍රයන් නිකුත් කිරීමේ මුවාවෙන් මේක කරලා තියෙන ව්‍යාපාරයක්.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. For further updates, stay in touch with other Derana, the nation's most trusted news source. Thank you. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit otherderana.lk.